I guess so. All right, welcome. Thanks everybody for joining. We're not giving out French fries today. I know there's a lot of people here, but we're going to be talking about DevOps. We're working with McDonald's, so today we're going to be diving in on their DevOps journey, getting an understanding of their current maturity, looking for opportunities for reusable pipelines with observability. What we want to do is we want to help them take the experience and rigor from their physical restaurants and begin to apply it within their internal DevOps platform. Joining me today are going to be a few of our folks from McDonald's as well as from ProServe. Sorry, I forgot the clicker. So let's get started. So I'm Mike Kingery. I'm a principal DevOps architect from AWS ProServe. I've been with ProServe for about 2 years now. I'm a specialist in helping organizations with DevOps maturity and specifically with continuous delivery. I'm a traveler, and I'm also a foodie. So as I like to travel around the world, I like to eat the local flavor. Here in Las Vegas, I spent a lot of time in Asia, as you can see, visiting the different McDonald's around the world. If you're ever in Chicago, there's actually a location where you can try the different foods from across the globe. It's a fun place to visit, so I'd encourage you to check it out. My favorite McDonald's food is actually the humble soft serve. You can find these all across Asia in little McCafe windows that serve coffees, drinks, and desserts across the windows. So I'm really excited to get to partner with McDonald's. It lets me use my foodie experience as well as DevOps experience to help them with their journey. So as I mentioned earlier, joining me today is going to be Stephanie Koenig from McDonald's and Jason Norton from AWS ProServe.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Koenig and I work at McDonald's. I've got 3 children, 2 stepchildren who live in New Zealand and 1 who lives here with us in the US. I love to ski, travel, take great photos, and spend time with family. My favorite McDonald's meal is the fish fillet. Sometimes it's so good, I get the double. In the morning, I love our oatmeal with the fruit. At McDonald's, I run cloud infrastructure and operations. So I guess you could say my head is in the clouds and I'm loving it. For the last 7 years, I've been working at McDonald's, and let me tell you, it's a really exciting place. Where else can you design and build and deploy what's become one of the largest loyalty programs in the world? But that's in the past. Today, I'm super excited to talk to you about a topic I'm passionate about, DevOps. Maybe many of you can relate to my enthusiasm for this subject, but if you're not there yet, hopefully we'll get you there today.
Hello, and I'm Jason Norton. I'm the US East Delivery Director for AWS Professional Services. I've been at AWS for almost 9 years. I have 3 decades of transforming Fortune 500 businesses and their technology platforms. My favorite meal is pretty standard at McDonald's. It's a Big Mac, French fries, and Coke, so nothing too risque there. But I have 4 children, 16 to 26 years old, and I'm supported by my wonderful wife, Naomi. We love the outdoors, great food, hiking during the summer, boating during the summer, and snow skiing in the winter. So pleased to be here, and thanks for joining us.
All right, so Dev Food Ops. Everybody needs another one of these, right? You may not have realized it, but McDonald's is an expert at it. And what you're probably thinking is, what is Dev Food Ops? And the reality is it's nothing. I made it up for the show. For the purposes of today, however, it's going to be about the rapid and continuous delivery of small batches of food directly to customers. And I posit that McDonald's is an expert. They serve 1 billion people a day worldwide. We're talking about numbers that exceed the digital transactions for entire companies, and yet in this case, it's tangible food that's delivered hot directly to their customers. They've spent decades optimizing their processes in the same ways that we talk about DevOps: people, process, and technology. You can think about orders like Jira tickets with the requirements for what people are serving, for what they need, for what they're ordering in their meals. You can think about restaurant staff working in product teams, building orders, and delivering them in small batches. All of this is aligned on a culture of delighting their customers. Now, even more so aligned to these are going to be their use of internal platforms, both digital platforms like their point of sale system that take those orders in, both understanding what people want and where they need to be delivered, as well as their physical platforms, like the ones that hold the ingredients at just the right temperature and just within arm's reach so that the restaurant staff can build those orders and deliver those meals. They use these platforms to make sure that things are repeatable, safe, and fast for their delivery. So now it's time for McDonald's to take that dev food op experience, that experience and rigor from their physical restaurants, and begin to bring it internally into their DevOps platform. So joining us today on that journey is going to be a few of McDonald's characters.
Yeah, thanks for the introductions, team, and glad to have everybody here in the audience. So today we're going to introduce a cast of characters from McDonald's that's going to help us with this presentation. The first really represents the happiness and value we hope you get from this presentation, the McDonald's McNugget Buddies. If you didn't know, the McDonald's McNuggets were introduced in 1983, and right behind them followed McNugget Buddies that were part of the Happy Meal. We then have Officer Big Mac, who is responsible for enforcing law and order in McDonald's land. He is continually chasing, to the right, Hamburglar, preventing him from stealing and hoarding all the hamburgers in McDonald's land. And then finally, we have Grimace. Grimace is a slow but lovable character that loved milkshakes. He's going to represent observability today because you don't want slow, outdated metrics hindering your development and DevOps processes. So let's dive into the meat of the presentation. Stephanie, for those that aren't familiar, can you give the audience an overview of the scale and breadth of McDonald's?
Happy to. For anyone who isn't familiar with McDonald's, we are the world's largest restaurant company. We serve burgers and chickens in our restaurant, and we're famous for the Big Mac and our famous Chicken McNuggets. We've got over 40,000 restaurants in 118 countries around the world. And as Jason mentioned, every day of the year, we serve around 1 billion people. And yes, that's with the B. So as you can imagine, we don't do anything small at McDonald's. This includes our phone app, on which we support 69 million daily transactions. To keep all of this running, we have over 2.2 million people working in our restaurants, in our offices, and this includes several thousand developers, keeping all of our technology on the cutting edge. As Michael mentioned, we're experts at dev food ops. As you can imagine, to reliably serve and feed 1 billion people a day, fast, hot, and tasty food, we've had to become experts at setting restaurant standards, securing our food safety, and then gathering metrics so we can understand when we meet customer expectations and when we fall short. This rigor has made us successful around the world. Unfortunately, we've not been as rigorous with our DevOps practices, which also requires standardization, the ability to deploy secure code, and requires us to gather meaningful metrics. With 60% growth in our digital sales over the last several years, ensuring DevOps works smoothly is a very important part of driving our overall business success. To explain how we got here, I want to start by taking you back a few years. Wow, that's back too far. At McDonald's in 1976, we had around 4,000 restaurants, and DevOps wasn't even a concept until the early 2000s. That's a great photo, though. That's better. In 2019 and 2020, the McDonald's organization was working really hard on several big projects. We were building and testing the launch of our loyalty program. We needed to ensure that the new program would perform at our scale and delight our customers. We were also working on rolling out delivery around the world with partners like Uber Eats and others. Additionally, we were focused on improving the customer experience using offers via our games like Monopoly, our in-app experiences, and are better integrating all of that into our restaurants. At the time, we had lots and lots of product teams all working on different parts of these and other big projects. It's a huge time of transformation at McDonald's, and as we look back, this innovation really enabled us to thrive and honestly survive during COVID. In fact, we've all been moving so fast that several challenges have resulted. As I mentioned previously, we had lots and lots of product teams. These teams were designed to work very independently, ensuring the code was loosely coupled so we could move quickly. As a result, each of our product teams independently created their own DevOps pipelines. This meant that each team was required to have a deep knowledge of how their personal pipeline worked, instead of relying on common, easy-to-use CI/CD functionality. Since our pipelines were 100% customized by each product team, teams manually managed security compliance by setting configuration settings, security scans, and performing code reviews. All of this was done in a snowflake manner, and the results were tracked in a change management process. This meant that there was no way to quickly confirm if security checks had been completed. Our third challenge was really limited visibility. Because our code repositories, CI/CD tools, and other parts of our pipelines were all hosted by a third party, and we had these independent product teams, we had little to no visibility into metrics and how our pipelines were performing. As you can imagine, the technology footprint to serve 1 billion customers a day is really significant. I can tell you that it spans over 900 applications, hundreds of accounts, and over 64,000 EC2 instances. 6,400, sorry. As our digital sales grew, we realized we needed to become much more efficient. We needed to reduce the complexity of our CI/CD pipelines, and by making some changes, we probably could save some money. We also realized we really needed some help. So we reached out to AWS ProServe to help us assess our challenges and improve our DevOps solution. Jason, can you dive into the assessment?
Yeah, thanks, Stephanie. Appreciate it. Yeah, so wow, that's real big scale, right? 40,000 restaurants, over 1 billion served, right? At Amazon, we love to work backwards from the customer. This is really apparent as how we got started with McDonald's. We really started with a DevOps assessment. The DevOps assessment really it's a 6 to 8 week engagement, but it really helps you identify where to start. We find this with a lot of customers. They have pipelines in place, they have development teams, but the trouble is knowing where to get started and how to improve it. So at AWS, we understand each company is unique, and you have your own challenges and ways of doing things. So we start these engagements to deeply understand where you are at as a customer. We start with organization adoption. We try to understand whether you have leadership involvement, program management, and agile best practices, whether you have siloed teams, and incentivized culture for rewarding innovation and best practices. We look at your development lifecycle, right? And your tooling, repositories, infrastructure as code, and dive deep into your integrated development environment. We understand your testing and development process. And dive into QA. What are your test results? How complete is your coverage across your code? And do you have self-service capabilities for your testing frameworks? Then we look at your automated governance, right? Automated compliance, baseline configurations, registries, and do you have the right guardrails in place protecting your assets? And then with observability, we dive into logging and monitoring, your alarms, the visualization, and are you proactively monitoring for anomalies across your environment? At the end of the assessment, we give you an assessment report and give you a capability gap analysis. We provide a value stream map and then a customized application architecture where you can use for your future environment. But most importantly, we give you prescriptive guidance on how to improve your DevOps capabilities. So what's the value proposition from a business benefit? It's increased time to market by increasing the efficiency of your pipelines, removing bottlenecks, really resulting in a better customer experience. You can increase your customer's experience through, lost my train of thought there. Increase your customer experience through blue-green deployments, better rollback methodologies, so they don't impact your customers. And then we look at your technical benefits. How do you increase the speed of delivery with less errors, stability, automation, and efficiency in your pipeline? How do you have safer deployments? By ensuring the appropriate guardrails and tooling are in place, and you have automation built into the pipeline. Improving transparency across your various teams through better observability and collaboration, and boosting productivity through user experience and pipeline feedback cycles. We also want to reduce the non-differentiated work the developers do so they can concentrate on solving business problems and not improving your pipeline. So given the scale of McDonald's, we needed to cover a broad ground. Michael?
So McDonald's is pretty big. There's a lot of teams inside of the organization. McDonald's has divided themselves up into about 25 different business domains that they call product teams. And each of these product teams have multiple agile teams. We knew we were going to need to cover very wide ground to get a good perspective across the entire organization. So we selected 17 of these teams to complete a DevOps assessment for them. So it was so broad, we did a slimmed down version of this that included the capability gap analysis, which are the 5 categories that Jason talked about earlier, and a process called development value stream mapping that's used to identify constraints to systems. Our goal here was to identify common constraints so that we could identify common solutions to these that could be served up by a platform team. So we're going to take a look at one of these items, which is the development value stream mapping process. This is a lean activity that's based on value stream mapping, so something everybody can go home and do today. So I'm going to walk through a few slides here. They're going to talk about how that process works. The 3 main data points that we gather here are going to be in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, which are lead time, or LT, which is how long an activity takes from the start until the activity is completed. Process time, or PT, is how long of action is done during that work. So if you look in the box on the right with the pull request, there's a good example where the lead time is 8 hours from the time that a pull request is submitted to the time that it's approved and returned. But the actual code review itself is only 15 minutes. So that means for 7 hours and 45 minutes, there's some amount of waste, even if a developer goes off and does something else to create context switching. So that's one way that we're looking for things. The third data point that we're gathering as a part of this is %CA, which is percent complete and accurate. This is how often an item successfully moves to the next stage in the workflow as opposed to being kicked back due to defects, bugs, or issues that are identified. A few other data points that we gather are part of this are the team that owns the action. You can see the 2 in here are both blue from the dev team. Also, the happy path, which is the solid arrow telling us where the item goes if it's successful, and the dotted failure path telling us where it goes if it fails. So let's zoom out. This is some dummy data. This is not McDonald's data. This is just to kind of help you illustrate the point. In this particular diagram, you can see, if you look closely, this is a map from a definition of ready to a definition of done. This is a common way for teams to measure the flow and cycle of throughput. What we're looking for in value stream mapping is to identify constraints, and we're going to use the data points that we talked about in the previous slide to help identify them. There's 3 different ways that we're going to look for these. The first of this is large differences between that process time and lead time. Looking for waste in that same example that we talked about with the pull request is a perfect example of that now at the center of your screen. The second is we're looking for a low, complete, and accurate. We're looking for stages that have low accuracy. You'll notice in this particular example, there's actually a low, complete, and accurate in the QA stage. This doesn't actually mean that the QA team has done a bad job. It actually means the QA team has done their job. They're looking for issues and bugs. That's how they're incentivized, is by finding problems. But you can see when we batch solutions, if they find one defect in an entire solution, the whole batch is bad, and so it gets sent back. So that's an identification of large batches and constraints in the system. The third way that we identify constraints in the system is looking for concentrations of failure paths. This is where items all return to the same step in the workflow, which when we talk about software development is almost always going to be the developer. You can see in this particular example here, there's a lot of stages that are returning back to code solution. What this means now is that every time a problem is found, it comes back to the developer has to fix it, and now it needs to go through all of these workflows all over again. You can see how even if it's a simple and small change or just changing the background color on a button, it's going to take a long time to get through because it has to make it through all of these stages, all of these low, complete, and accurate, and somehow still make it to the end. As McDonald's is looking to deliver more quickly and with higher quality, we want to begin to shift left on these capabilities and start to speed up by eliminating these constraints. Specifically, we're going to use that data, however, to prioritize the impact on these constraints. We can't work on everything all at once. So now let's zoom out and do a much more purposeful eye chart. I know this is really zoomed out and it's blurry on purpose because this is information about McDonald's processes. The intention here is to show you a little bit about the scale itself. This is just 10 out of the 17 teams that we worked with. And even at this zoomed out and blurred scale, you can tell they don't operate the same way. Our goal isn't to make them operate the same way, right? We want development teams that have autonomy to fix and solve their problems. As a platform team, our goal is to identify common constraints and common solutions that can be delivered. We're looking for those commodity activities that are part of this value stream mapping to serve up as solutions, not to make every team look exactly the same. So that's why it's important as platform teams to run these across multiple teams to get that breadth of view to understand how teams look and how they operate. This allows the platform team to be customer obsessed by having more information about how teams operate. And as we mentioned earlier, helping them to prioritize the actions that they do. What's interesting about these maps is that for many teams, it was the first time they were starting to see each other's pipelines. And for almost all of the teams, it was probably the first time they were applying data to their pipelines to understand how to prioritize improvements. So now that we've completed the assessment across these 17 teams, we're going to take the data that came from both the value stream mapping exercises across those teams, as well as the assessment and understanding their capabilities, and apply them against the pain points that Stephanie mentioned earlier on: high toil, the onerous security process, and limited visibility. We're going to touch on each of these one at a time before we deep dive into topics, and Jason and Stephanie will help me out with that. The first is around customer experience, right? The developer experience is gaining a lot of traction these days. And in this particular case, McDonald's was looking to move their platform not just to a central platform, but to a new tool stack, moving from Jenkins into GitHub. What that does, it creates new opportunities for cognitive load. You're using new systems, new tools, new processes. You're moving it from one team and centralizing it. So we want to focus not just on the architecture of this system, but what the experience is going to be for those developers. The second opportunity is with security itself. Whenever we make changes to pipelines, we try to improve them. Our tendency is to want to add more security controls, and that's a good thing. But doing so tends to add a lot of overhead to the process and make things more difficult. So we want to bake in security as we shift it left so that as we add it, we don't make it that much more difficult to use the pipeline and to use the platform. The last is really around observability. And observability isn't going to be just of product teams and their systems as they're deploying them into production, but also the pipelines themselves. How long is it taking each of the stages to run? Is it being successful? Which tests fail? What do your security results look like? But also the platform team itself needs observability into the platform. They need to know how their customers are using it and what success looks like for them. The very last thing that we're going to integrate into here are our friendly NFRs, our non-functional requirements. The three in particular that we're working with here for McDonald's platform system are scalability, reliability, and performance. The existing platform that they're running on was neither scalable nor performant. They struggled where it would fall over when too many builds were happening, and feedback was taking a very long time to get back to the developers. So it's important that we wrap these NFRs into every improvement activity that we do.
Thanks, Michael. Great job boiling what we discovered in the Devops assessment into actionable steps. So now let's dive into each one of those areas, starting with developer experience. So really, a broad concept, developer experience, is about enabling products team to focus on solving business problems. Pipelines are a critical path for customers to enforce standards, ensure compliance, but also increase speed to market. But you have to build in great processes and workflow and capability into those pipelines to really make a difference. This means removing automating commodity activities and reusing application patterns across your organization. It's eliminating dependencies through simplification, better workflow, and automated tooling. You help remove the need to context switch by having developers focus on developing and platform teams focus on developer tooling. And you reduce the need for your developers to maintain complex systems, or what we call cognitive load. So one of the ways we see customers provide a great developer experience is by forming platform teams. Platform teams help developers with consistent tooling. Much like McDonald's delivers consistent experience no matter if you buy a meal in Topeka, Kansas or Las Vegas, Nevada. They reduce bottlenecks, improving performance and reducing errors, much like McDonald's continually works to improve drive-through efficiency by embracing the art of small fixes to solve big problems. They improve operations and monitoring, similar to how McDonald's measures efficiency in all of its business operations, such as order fulfillment at restaurants, stockout rates for inventory control, and timely delivery rates for delivery orders. A dedicated team works to eliminate snowflakes or multiple different pipelines within your organization that Michael mentioned earlier. Much like McDonald's associates are trained to do the same thing with the same tools and the same processes. Platform teams gain efficiencies by harvesting reusable patterns instead of having developers recreate common application components, and they use a shared library of best practices. All of this allows developers to work on high-value business problems or innovation instead of maintaining difficult or complex systems.
As I mentioned before, our product teams developed their own pipelines. But there was little to no coordination across teams during pipeline development, even though they were all using the same tool set. As a result, when teams started deploying code more frequently, we began to run into problems. It turned out that when more than one team tried to deploy at the same time, our solution locked up or crashed. As a result, we started spending a lot of time fixing the solution after a crash and/or coordinating our release windows across teams. It quickly became clear that our solution required teams to know too much about each pipeline and how it worked. It was unreliable and would not support our growing needs. We needed a simpler solution so our developers could focus on what they did best, solving our business problems.
Sorry, we dance here.
Yeah.
Right.
We didn't get the waltz down right.
I did promise interpretive dance earlier. So McDonald's is planning to move to a GitHub platform. We talked a little bit about this earlier. They're moving away from Jenkins into GitHub. And we knew this was going to impact the cognitive load. We've got new tools, new tech, new platforms, new processes, modernizations, new controls. All of this is new opportunities for things that developers need to keep in their heads in order to get their jobs done. Now, indicators that we had seen as a part of the assessment were that teams at McDonald's, these product teams, had taken the you build it, you run it mentality with gusto. The problem is this meant they were managing commodity aspects of the platform that should have been centralized and didn't need to be managed at that level. This was taking away from their ability to work and focus on novel business problems. In many cases, teams had taken opportunities to try to fill the gaps in these pipeline processes internally themselves, but hadn't done so necessarily in a reusable way. So the solution for this at a very basic level is starting by creating a DevOps platform team, a team that would be able to serve up these components as a product. So McDonald's took the prescriptive guidance from the assessment and formed a DevOps platform team. They used that guidance to help them build a mission and a vision for that team. As we can read here, specifically that's to build a fast and reliable delivery of components with built-in security and observability, simplifying and standardizing through self-service, and enabling cross-team collaboration. So there's two words that I want you to focus on in there, which are self-service and enablement. The reason this is important is anytime we create a new DevOps team, right, this is a new silo inside of the organization. What we're trying to do is we're trying to enable teams to move forward. We're not trying to create a silo. So this kind of introduces us to the second thing that we did, is every DevOps team is a new silo in the organization. But we know is that we're moving to this new platform. The platform isn't going to be ready on day one, and we can't have everybody wait until the platform is ready. We'd seen that teams struggled a bit with collaboration and working together to fill those gaps as a part of the assessment. Teams were not necessarily sharing the work that they had, so we knew they were going to need some help and assistance to onboard into this new platform. To solve this, we created a structure which is called an enablement team. This enablement team's goal is to bridge the gap in self-service while this new platform is being created. So now I'm going to walk you through some diagramming here that will help you understand how the DevOps platform team and the enablement team work together. This is a framework called the Team Topologies Framework. There's a book that's available on Amazon by Matthew Skelton and Manuel Paesch. I suggest you go out and buy it on Amazon, pick it up there. If you find it at your local Walmart, or I'm sorry, at your local McDonald's, don't pick it up there because it's probably somebody's copy they're reading. So on the center of the diagram here in the yellow boxes, these are the product teams. These are the teams that are using the platform and the system. On the bottom is our blue DevOps platform team, and on the left is the enablement team, which is signified by purple. Now, the three different interaction types that we're going to talk about today are the purple, collaboration, the gray triangle, which signifies delivering something as a service, which means that it's available through either a UI interface or through documentation, and the third being collaboration, which means that teams are working together through facilitation in order to enable a team to complete an activity. So for the first box here, we can see that the DevOps platform team is serving up the DevOps platform as a service for product teams to take in. But it's not going to be available on day one. This is where the enablement team comes in handy. For teams that are going to be adopting the new platform, they may require facilitation from this enablement team in order to onboard. Now, you'll notice here that not all of the product teams are using the enablement team. And this is likely due to one of two things. The first of this is that teams may already have been onboarded into the platform and they don't need any help anymore. Again, we don't want the enablement team to become a dependency. The goal is self-service. So once you're onboarded and once you're enabled, you don't need the enablement team anymore. The second is that the platform itself should become more and more self-service, which means that the enablement team should be needed less and less for these commodity aspects. This doesn't necessarily mean that as the platform becomes more mature, that the enablement team just suddenly disappears and goes away. The goal is that the platform grows and takes on new capabilities, and the enablement team moves away from the ones that are self-service and begins to help them with things like integrating AI solutions into their pipeline. The last element I want to draw your attention to here is the purple rhombus between the enablement team and the DevOps platform team. What this signifies is the collaboration between these two teams to identify new constraints and items that the platform team can serve up. That enablement team is working directly facilitating product teams to help them onboard, so they're going to identify new things that will go in the platform team backlog that they can serve up as a service. So now the thing you were probably expecting first is actually the components themselves, the reusable and observable components. The existing components were not very reusable. They were designed and customized by each of the teams to implement for their own use. This meant we had a lot of bespoke and point solutions that weren't really intended to be scaled and weren't extensible for teams to use and leverage. The solution to this was for us to create a minimum lovable platform, an MLP. This means the smallest set of components that creates a platform that teams can use. Remember what we said earlier, self-service wasn't going to be available on day one? Well, we still need that minimum amount that people can get started with. That's our MLP. What does that look like? We're going to break that up into three main components. These should probably be very familiar to anybody familiar with DevOps. We've got CI for continuous integration, CD for continuous delivery, and then observability flanking the bottom here. From a continuous integration perspective, with GitHub, they're using that for their source code repository, for their builds, executing their tests, running their security scans, generating artifacts, and stuffing those into Artifactory. Moving into continuous delivery, McDonald's is using GitHub Actions here as well to trigger their GitOps model, which uses Argo CD. Right now, it's manual. These things are not connected, so there's the team that goes in and identifies the repository and the artifact that needs to be deployed out. But we're hoping to connect these things together in the future. Remember, MLP. But across the bottom, what we've done is baked in observability for both the CI and the CDN from day one so that everybody has information and observability about what's happening from the platform without needing to roll their own. And remember how Stephanie talked earlier about the platform falling over? Well, what was happening was that when teams were creating builds with the old platform, it wasn't intended to be scalable enough. And as McDonald's DevOps maturity was growing, they were building more and more frequently, and the build servers were not built to scale to that load. So we created yet another MLP, a minimum lovable platform, for their scaling solution. In this case, against their runners for completing builds. What happens here is that when a runner is needed, it makes a request out to see if there are any runners available. If there is, it will go ahead and grab one. If not, it will execute a Lambda request that will queue another runner to be spun up, and then it will begin to use this runner. A timed CloudWatch event will come through later and look for any runners that are not being used and will terminate them. This helps to keep things very clean. But this is just an MLP. So what we did as a part of this process was to bake in an observability so that McDonald's has data and metrics to help them to improve this as they go along. This includes doing things like using spot instances to help them save money on different type of instance types, as well as using and right-sizing the right instance type that's being used by these processes. So tracking both of these lets them have that continuous improvement.
Thanks, Michael. I think I'll have the minimum lovable product stuck in my head for the rest of my life, especially with those little chicky nuggets on it, right? No, I love to see that AWS is helping McDonald's, making their developer lives easier. So let's move on to something that's really job zero at Amazon, security. So a couple things to consider with pipeline security is one, Michael and Stephanie have mentioned this earlier. We commonly find that customers have manual processes or processes that occur outside the pipeline when it comes to security. And it's so important for efficiency and automation to get those built into the pipeline, right? So they're automated and they go faster. The approvals, the workflows, the checks, and the tooling are all right there, and they don't slow you down. You know, as you get started with pipeline security, it's important to remember that pipeline security should enforce standards and provide guardrails within the pipeline, right? And they should apply policy as code as you deploy your code. They should implement a secret scanning technology and vulnerability scanning, so you're detecting vulnerabilities and issues in the pipeline. And you adopt least privileged access to your applications and your environment. And they should establish robust logging and monitoring in order to go back and do analytics and forensic in case something, God forbid, something happens, right? So I know that McDonald's has a very rigorous security policy and framework. Stephanie, you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Happy to. Security is a top priority at McDonald's. To ensure our code is safe when we take it to production, teams were required to determine when to run checks. Code was being scanned manually in a snowflake way, and this was all done outside of pipelines. This resulted in the need to manually update or reconfigure controls as they evolved. Additionally, the validation of these checks were done manually, as I mentioned before, via change management process. The result was that artifacts did not support our continuous delivery, and so our deployments were being slowed down, awaiting security check confirmations. Another challenge was with the development of pipelines completely residing in the hands of a development team, teams had the ability to make changes to every aspect of the pipeline. This meant that developers could adjust the security thresholds versus fixing security issues. As we've all seen, not all product owners or developers picked the secure option when up against a tight deadline. We needed to close this loophole. Finally, we also wanted to shift left a lot of our security scans to enable teams and allow them to fix security issues earlier in the pipeline.
So just like that overall pipeline process that we talked about, there's two areas of focus that we're going to have on security. One, which is going to be reusability, and the second around observability. Security controls have a particular need for standardization. The controls themselves need to be centrally managed often by a security team, and they need to be consistently reported back for auditability purposes. As we expand these controls, we need to make sure that we reduce that overhead while we begin to increase that security posture. But what we had seen as a part of the assessment was that teams had different implementations of these security controls based upon their interpretation of the controls. This meant that some teams had baked them into the pipeline, but for many teams, it was actually manually executed. Sometimes it was early in the development process, but most of the time, it was actually after development was well done. The solution for this was to create independent, reusable security components. So this is a zoomed-in version, again, of that same diagram that we showed earlier, showing an example of just SonarQube. As I mentioned earlier, as an MLP, that minimum lovable pipeline, we're just going to start with one of these components to create a reusable architecture that allows them to pull in additional controls using the same architecture design and not having to bake new ones in. So having SonarQube as an independent, reusable workflow means that teams can actually begin to adopt this workflow without having to adopt all of the rest of the pipeline, getting into GitHub, getting everything set up and configured. So not only does this allow for moving items in and out of the pipeline, it also helps us with adoption by making it easier to adopt some of these components earlier on. The second issue is around observability of the security results themselves. What we learned from the assessment was that not everybody in security is going to have access to SonarQube, and even if they do, they'd have to look at other tools in order to see the context of builds that are happening in one system, scans that are happening in another, and deployments that are happening in another tool. The solution for this is to integrate those security results into their observability platform, which in this case is Datadog. So now you can see this begins to democratize the security data. Teams can easily see their scan results showing critical, major, minor violations. And because it's integrated into their entire observability platform, it's now visible within the context of the entire build and deployment system. Speaking of observability, Jason?
Awesome. Thanks, Michael. I love seeing McDonald's making their applications more secure, something near and dear to Amazon's heart. So as we move on, I want to see a show of hands. How many people are here are developers that have deployed their code, waited hours for it to deploy, all of a sudden to see your deployment failure, and the return code you get is cryptic at best. You can't even tell why it failed. Has anybody ever experienced that before? I know I have. That's why observability is so important. You have to have the right alerts and alarming and metrics and notifications to the people that need it, right? You have to know why did your code fail and what do you do about it? And as we heard from Stephanie, they didn't know that when we first got started. So with pipeline observability, I think some things we have to think about is that really good pipeline observability has deep insights, useful error codes, timely status updates, and automated notifications. It gives the developers the data they need to move fast, make decisions, and quickly resolve issues, right? Security teams too as well. This frees up time to work on impactful outcomes, innovative solution, and really enables that process improvement. Stephanie?
One of the challenges has been our lack of centralized visibility into what code has changed and what's been deployed into our environments. In turn, we've had no standardized way to roll back changes when issues occur. As you can imagine, when we have issues or outages, it's critical to be able to quickly assess and triage the problem. After all, we are a 24/7 organization. Due to the disparate CI/CD solution, when we had issues, we needed to gather some subset of our 900 application technicians together. We had to sit down and talk to them and align on who deployed last and discuss where the issue might be coming from. This was incredibly painful, extremely time-consuming.
Yeah, so teams don't necessarily have an understanding of what's happening in their pipeline and in their platforms, especially when they don't have insight. As a result of this, they can't really debug problems when they occur. What we'd identify as a part of the assessment was actually that when pipelines would fail, teams, instead of debugging it, would actually just wait a few minutes and then try again and hope that it would run. Sadly, actually, that does work. But in many cases, they may not have had access to the systems or visibility of even where to look. Teams, to solve this gap, had actually begun to create their own dashboards, their own proof of concepts to create observability. But many of these dashboards were either not completed or not shared with other teams because they weren't created in a very shareable way. They were meant as point solutions. So our solution for this was to create some reusable dashboards that would be available from day one with data baked into them from the various systems, making it available to everybody that began to adopt the platform. As you can see in this screenshot here, teams are now able to identify what's failing. They have access to see all of the different steps, how long those steps take, and look at the historical runs to be able to look back and see, is this abnormal? Is this what it should be like? They can also pinpoint the individual deployments. If you look at the screenshot that is in the lower right, the box that's there in red is the actual deployment for when that happened. This allows them to now trace back to what may have been related to the release that they deployed. Did it cause the build server to take longer to build that release? Did it cause security issues to be identified or quality problems? Now they have traceability of that within the context of that build and deployment system. Because it's available out of the box, it's now a much more scalable system on its own. Everybody that gets into GitHub and GitHub Actions gets access to this. And because they can now identify problems, they can start to take more ownership of the platform. But the second area for observability is not just the product teams themselves, it's the platform team. They need to build trust with their new user base. They are a new platform team, and we already know from the data and metrics that we gathered that the existing platform is not serving their needs. They want to enable and delight these customers, so they need to focus on those particular pain points, which include both performance and reliability. From a performance perspective, some of the response times to get feedback from the platform are more than an hour. In the case of reliability, as we mentioned earlier, sometimes when things fall over, they just kind of gave up on it. And that gives you a bit of an understanding of the state of the development teams and the happiness with the platform they have. The solution to this as well is creating a dashboard that the platform team views that allows them to hold themselves accountable to these data points and these metrics that are important to their customers. Let's take a look at one of those dashboards. This shows you the performance difference. If we look at the measures on the left side, this is the outgoing platform, which is Jenkins, and the incoming platform, which is GitHub Actions. If you look at the timings, however, you'll actually notice that GitHub Actions is slower. And that might be surprising. But this is an MLP. It's a minimum lovable platform. The goal to get started is to get something working and get something operational. The most important aspect of this is making sure that we have the right baseline data, and I do mean the right data, so that as we're continuously improving, we can make sure we're focusing on the right things and that we can show those differences and changes. So this helps that platform team to build trust by saying, hey, we're paying attention, and being able to show the delta, the differences as they make those improvements. So Stephanie, let's talk about what you've got next.
So today, we've made a lot of progress on our DevOps journey, but we still have a lot of work ahead of us. By year's end, we'll complete the MLP development and deploy our unified solution to several of our product teams. Moving into 24, we'll start enhancing the MLP to include additional security tools, generative AI, and code scanning protocols. We'll then expand the deployments of our DevOps platform and other teams and implement rollback standards. As we try and close out the year, we're going to institute tools and processes to support inner sourcing and enhance our generative AI to do code reviews. We're really excited about the DevOps future and can't wait to give our teams a lot more flexibility to spend time on business problems and interesting technology. If you are interested in joining a fun, wonderful, exciting place to be, we have lots of job opportunities out there at McDonald's. Please reach out. Take a look at our website or reach out to myself. We'd love to have you join and be a part of our exciting adventure. Thank you.
Awesome, Stephanie. I appreciate it. Sounds like you still have some work ahead of you, but from the AWS perspective, McDonald's is on the right path. So are you loving DevOps? Because I know I'm loving it. So today we covered the breadth and scale of McDonald's, how AWS professional services has helped them solve their business challenges. We covered the DevOps assessment, and we introduced the McDonald's characters to all of you. That was best of all, right? And we also talked about platform teams and how they're enabling their development teams, the work that AWS did alongside McDonald's to increase their observability of their pipeline and improve their security posture. I think that's a complete Happy Meal. So actions you can take, and if you want to learn more, if you're interested, you can read up on how the volume stream mapping can identify DevOps constraints. You can learn more about AWS's DevOps guidance and best practices, or you can dive deep into the DevOps certification. If you want to connect with AWS professional services to help assisting and maturing your DevOps strategy, you can work with your account teams, or you can scan the QR code on the screen to connect with us. So, as we wrap up today's session, please make sure you complete the survey on the mobile app, and we'd love to take any questions from the audience if you have.